it's impossible for the market based on to be able to create these homes in of itself. That in some way or form, whether it's a land donation, whether it's direct financial assistance, whether it's infrastructure assistance, these units can't be built relative to the current market, relative to the current market costs. And I'll go into a little bit costs in another slide. In order to meet the statistical needs for Santa Feans, right? And I'll have some really terrible kind of examples in terms of who can be served and not be served. But please remember that 10% number right now, because we're going to come back to that in terms of the number of folks, for all the units we're building, only 10% of them are going to go to native Santa Feans. Almost 40% of people who even have a current mortgage now are able to get into a home right now are cost burden. So even if you're lucky to be able to find a home and get into one, you're going to be paying more than statistically you have the ability to pay, right? What does that mean? It means you don't take your vacations, you skimp on food, you save on utilities wherever you can, right? It doesn't provide you a high quality of life, right? You don't take your kids out to not go skiing with Charlie if you can help it, right? So these are the things that you don't do. Next slide, please. This is kind of the same issues. You'll see right now for a single-family medium home, I want you to keep this in mind. There's a 789,395% number. This is a 22% increase, right, from the year before. 22%. We've never seen, and I've been at this for a long, long time. I've never seen numbers of that appreciation level for 30 years. And I've never seen, we have the highest, cities are graded in terms of the affordability indexing. We call it affordability indexing. We have the worst affordability indexing that we've ever had, statistically, that we've ever had, ever, in this metro area. So the situation has never been worse. Next slide, please. So when we compile our housing data, we look at enormous amount of other data systems and both use and extrapolate from other source funds for data. So this is just an area to show you that the type of data that's been shown that we've used that we're not alone, right? That there's Board of Realtors, New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority, the Bureau of Business and Economic Research have all come up with very similar numbers as we are coming out in terms of both the shortage of rental and home ownership opportunities and the amount of unaffordability of the products that are currently going into place now. Next slide, please. So I'm going to concentrate on this particular thing because it's something that Charlie can actually understand, so I want to make sure he understands this here. So the sorry, I can't help it. So so what we do when we're compiling a cost analysis is we go through and we talk to a lot of builders, developers, financiers, people in the business. Community Development Department is also in the business developing its own units. Is doing a cost analysis. So what is the cost of land? What is the cost of money? What is the cost of time for entitlements? What is the cost of infrastructure? What is the cost of labor? What is the cost of materials? And we compile those numbers together, and these are generalized numbers, and we have one both for rental and one for single-family home ownership. We compile these numbers together, and then we overlay it with a density matrix, right? So that we're clear in terms of, because density is the one thing that we have control of. We don't have a lot of control over the, well, we do have actually control of the cost of labor, and we have chosen to try to increase the cost of labor, and I think that's a good thing, right? It's important that people have at least livable wages here. So our wage scales are relatively high relative to both primarily the rest of the United States and definitely the rest of New Mexico. we can't do a lot about the cost of materials, right? Materials are what they are. There's not a lot that we can do about the cost of materials. We can make it easier to be able to transport materials here, saving some costs. We can buy in bulk. But the relative value of materials, the county of Santa Fe as a legal entity, as a county itself, doesn't have a lot of ability to affect. There are a few things we can affect, though. One, we can affect the cost of money, meaning once, and hopefully that this affordable housing plans, there's systems in there that allow us to subsidize interest rates to bring down the cost of money in order to make things affordable. After my presentation, there'll be a presentation about a 4% low-income housing tax credit project, which essentially that's what it does, right? Because it uses the bonding authority of the county and uses federal low-income housing tax credits to be able to lower the cost of interest that is paid and then lower cost of the development costs, right? We can participate in that, actively participate. And I had a very similar job at the city of Santa Fe and created several thousand units participating with low-income housing tax credit developers in order to lower their cost of funds and then be able to then lower cost of the units. It's a standard thing that we can and should do. We also have the ability to finance infrastructure so that we can lose the county's bonding capacity to lower in different ways, right? So there's TIDs, there's STIS, to lower the cost of providing infrastructure, because that's the hardest money to get, right? You go to a bank and no one wants to do infrastructure financing anymore. Right? After 2008, all the local banks had to get out of the business. And so that's one of the reasons why I have affordability problem is that there's no water and sewer, right? And in order to be able to provide affordable housing, you need water and sewer to provide those densities that you need. We don't have it, right? And so it comes on the cost of the developer to do it. We can assist in doing it. That lowers the cost. Those are minor assistance things, right? They'll create a 4 or 5%, maybe a 7% difference in terms of total cost. Now, we're going to go for every possible cost we can, right? Lower cost every can. So any place we can, we want to try a lower cost. By far, the biggest issue relative to our ability to lower costs is the county's ability, land use is by far the biggest issue in land use, and that goes to density. What we are allowing for density has a direct effect, an incredible effect on affordability. So if you see that this 1 unit per acre, right, on the homeownership density analysis, and we do 1 unit per acre, we do a cost analysis. What is the cost of land? What cost of entitlements and things of that nature if you're building on 1 unit per acre, and you'll see there it's about $783,000. It's not, and I've done this 20 times in 20 different communities. The cost, the market cost that you generally see in communities is relative to the densities that are being provided. So what is our medium housing cost? Almost exactly that. What is our base density in the county of Santa Fe? 1 unit per acre. We, as the county, are creating this affordable housing problem because we are insisting on very low density kind of sprawl development. Go up to 10 units per acre, right? And you'll see the price goes down to $396,000 per unit. Now, still a lot, right? I mean, I know what Charlie paid for his place, but I mean, the rest of us, I don't know what we're being able to pay or be able to live in terms of our houses. But that's a 46% reduction in cost just by that numerical difference, 46%. And here's what's most significant. Only 10% of Santa Feans can afford 1 dwelling unit per acre. And this is disheartening in some senses, but at least some sense of hope. 40% of Santa Feans can afford 10 units per acre, right? Now, what are we going to do with 60% of the Santa Feans? And consider that 60% of Santa Feans, right? Also, if you go back to the other data that indicated, is that's a relevant number. We need to, because our skewing is so bad in terms of unaffordability relative to wages, local wages, people who were born and raised here, that we have functionally allowed 60% of the population having no chance to be able to live or stay here. So think about that. In 2 generations from now, the only people left, if this trend continues, will be folks who are able to have their grandma's house and be able to pass it on, right? The functional area, if they're a wage scale earner here, working and living here, won't be able to afford anything even but the smallest level apartments if we don't change this trend around. It's not impossible to change this trend around, right? We've done it before. All kidding aside, me and Charlie go way back. I was the developer of the Tierra Contenta development for the city of Santa Fe. We were creating over 500 units a year of affordable housing, right? It actually slowed down the market considerably. We can actually do the same kind of thing here, right? There's other things that we can do, design, finance, and build to be able to assist in making sure that Santa Feans can at least afford, or at least have an ability to maybe afford to live here. I mean, where are your kids, right? Where do they go? Right? They're not here, right? Where are families gone? They're not here anymore, right? One big reason for that is the lack of opportunities relative to housing affordability. It's important to recognize what role we are playing in making this place unaffordable for the people who live and work here, right? In fact, that my colleagues here, who I work with every day, their kids have no chance of their ability to be able to stay here unless we change this around. And they're hardworking folks trying to make a living, trying to get things going here. That's why I think this is incredibly important. This was why we put affordable housing crisis situation, and why we wanted to present for you today. This is kind of a build-up, and if you so choose, we'd be happy to. Well, I won't be here, but we'd be happy to present you our affordable housing plan. That's kind of its in final stage of development, and provides all the background data. Well, it's a lot of background data and analysis, and then new programs to be run, and then suggestions to be able to turn that around so that we can build in a pattern and a language, much like we traditionally had. I mean, people say, well, these apartments are ugly or have different issues. Like, if you look at traditional, when I developed Tierra Contenta, we looked at the densities on the east side of Santa Fe, right? And they range from 7 to 10 units per acre. If, in fact, we allowed our people to be able to build and design in the same pattern which we had traditionally done, right? Which we just allow that little granny flat to be able to go on. You put Charlie out on the side there and have his own little place, but eventually, you build a little patio in between. You build out a little at the time. You allow these things to grow organically, right? You come up with one of the most beautiful kind of urban areas in the United States, right? Which is Santa Fe, Santa Fe's traditional pattern. There's no reason why we can't do that. Now, though, we're becoming so unaffordable that if we are to rebuild and redo, which we have a proposal in this plan to be able to take down state land office land. When I was at the city, we actually bought the Bellama Corporation. I bought out the Bellama Corporation entitlements and recreated a community. We can do the same exact thing, right? But it would look like downtown Santa Fe. Again, one of the most beautiful urban areas in the United States. People come from all over the United States to visit and then decide to live here. And therefore, we can do the same thing, though, for ourselves, if we so choose. So I'll get off my high horse and try to get off Charlie's back here for a moment. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me anything.
Thank you, Joseph. Thorough, like usual. Probably unplug it. Does the commission have any questions of Joseph? Frank?
Yeah, I do have a question, which is, I'm pretty sure that none of this has come to us as a surprise to you all, and it's been going on a long time, and you say the biggest problem is density. And has there been change in the density in various parts of the county that would allow there to be more housing built there?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, so it's interesting that you bring up, so thank you very much for asking the question. There's been no fundamental changes in the overall density of the land use policies. I think that's something that necessarily has to look at, because if not, we're just going to be bringing $700,000 homes, right? And the only exclusion will be the inclusionary zoning provision, which we're mandating a portion of that be affordable. Now, there's one little kind of sliver of land that we have the density by right in the county. It's on 14, and one of the projects that are coming for you today is attempting to be able to bring it to buy that property in order to do development. So there's a very small portion. Hopefully there will be another one that's coming up soon. My intention was actually also there's some state land, you know where the rail runner stop is on 599? So there's state-owned land. There's new federal policy that allows a municipality, if it was bought with transportation monies was theirs, to take that out to build affordable housing, right? I can build apartments literally right on the rail runner stop, so that people have a transportation system that don't have to drive right in close. But that's only 1/4. As far as we can find out, there's very little opportunities in other places without other kind of land use approvals coming into play first, right? So there's other land use approvals. Now, it is interesting because I think when the current SLDC was organized, there was an issue about, people were not thinking of this in detail, but they're saying, well, we don't have any. In fact, we have a minimum density. I think it's 3 units per acre, right, in the community college district. But we don't have density restrictions. It's like, well, we actually do, right? We have pretty high height restrictions, right? So if you can't build higher, you can't build more dense, right? We still have kind of suburban, what I call suburban-oriented street design systems, parking requirements, setback requirements. All those things are built on a suburban model versus a more urban, walkable place where you don't have to go anyplace else, but except for your immediate area to walk and to live and work, right? And so also this is also really destructive, right? I mean, there's huge amounts of studies relative to kind of the urban sprawl that we're creating in terms of environmental unsoundness, right? So if you have to get in your car every day to go from one place to another, that's a huge problem. Right? That by nature creates a real problem for environmental reasons, right? And we pride ourselves in trying to be more kind of environmentally sound, right? And that's Santa Fe, I'm proud of that, and I think we do try. But if our base core of land use is based on a model where you have to use a car, and the car is being promoted because of their parking requirements or being street systems design, things of that nature, and are not promoting people, forcing people to walk. I mean, you have to force me to walk, right? I mean, and ever since Charlie hit me, I don't even ride a bike anymore, so that's an issue. So, but but if we don't change that paradigm, right, back to our own history, right? We can go back to our own history that we're right here, right now, living in. Think about if this kind of construct was where people were living just versus tourist areas, right? What a wonderful place to live, right? I would have loved to live downtown again. I mean, as a young kid, I lived off Garcia Street, and that would be wonderful. No chance of that happening anymore, right? And I think it would be wonderful for the rest of us. Mr. Katz, did I answer that question?
Thank you.
Thank you. JJ.
Very impressive presentation, Mr. Montoya. With the questions I have, are you talking about affordable housing within Santa Fe County? Does that include the city?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, thank you very much. So we only have land use jurisdiction outside the city, right? We don't have land use jurisdiction within the city. Now, the city, because they provide water and sewer every place, right, has the ability to be more dense, but for political constraints and other reasons, what you see happening, which I don't want to say anything negative about the city, but all these apartments are kind of going up spotty here and there, right? To me, that's not the way one should do it, right? And what's happening is because there's nothing zoned in the city that for multifamily, they're getting commercial spaces which you can build multifamily on. So they're just struggling to find places that are appropriately zoned, and then you have this kind of spot here and there, right? What we should be doing and the city should be doing is saying we're going to be able to define places that are more dense and make new downtown Santa Fe's, right? that are walkable, that are enjoyable, and that are far more dense. They have the water and sewer systems to be able to do it. So do we in certain areas, right? The SLGC has been very keen and very good about distinguishing where we're going to be put water and sewer. But instead of providing 3 units per acre, which doesn't even support 15% of the population, not even less than 10% of the population, right? We need to have a higher value. So I'm talking that we have the ability to do something in the county. You've got incredible staff here who are capable and can do the right thing, and to making sure that we can move in that kind of direction.
You know, you mentioned like 17,000 units that are needed immediately. Now, is that in the county?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My apologies. I didn't understand. Forgive me, sir. So that's actually in the city and the county both. That's in the metro area. And here's what's really disheartening. This doesn't include all the people, that number, that's immediate here right now today. That doesn't include people that are moving here, or for instance, the 1,000 more people that Los Alamos Labs wants to employ here, right? So I'm all, you know, my other part of my job is economic development. I like people having jobs. But one of the things that's happened here, 65% of the people that work here don't live in Santa Fe. And I'm talking Santa Fe County. So we're great about creating jobs. But we're not getting any of the benefits of all the jobs we're creating because we're not people housing there, right? They're not buying at our stores here. They're not in our school system. They're not participating in sports here. They're in Rio Rancho, there's in Las Vegas, they're different places, right? And so that's a huge problem, right? Part of my job is to create more jobs for people. I enjoy that. I think it's a fantastic thing. And am I doing it to be able to create housing in Rio Rancho? Yeah, it's terrible.
You know, the other question I had is that we've been in a severe drought for over 20 years. And Santa Fe County relies on the Buckman Direct Diversion for a majority of its water. And that system has been down periodically, you know, a week or two. And the last couple of weeks that they've produced barely enough water to supply what they need. And they have an agreement with the city of Santa Fe, you know, to borrow water from the city of Santa Fe and then pay it back. And then the county infrastructure is very limited. I mean, they don't have enough water for all the plants that maybe are in the works. You know, there's a lot of developments, and they rely on Santa Fe County water. They cannot drill wells. The aquifer is being depleted. There's communities in Santa Fe County, like Cañoncito and Cañada de los Alamos, their wells went dry. Either they're polluted or well run dry, and they come to Santa Fe County to run pipelines to their area. So we're limited as far as the water available for Santa Fe County. I mean, you want to increase development, but how can you serve those people with potable water? That's the problem.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I'm really glad you brought that up because sometimes that's considered like the elephant in the room, right? So here's my answer to that. We have a choice. We have a choice to build far more efficient, water-wise developments that use less water than anything that's being done now to house Santa Feans, or we can continue to having sprawl that uses lots of water to not house Santa Feans. We have a choice to make. Now, one big issue I think the way I have to keep in mind is not only are we right now, but, and I'm a firm believer in the concept of global change, this is going to happen for a while. Things are going to get rougher. So why don't we create developments, and why don't we do systems in place that actually save water, that use less water? Why aren't we recycling 100% of water? The state of Israel actually recycles 98% of its water. We do 2. There is no reason when we're doing developments that we should not be using 100% of our recycled water systems. So as an example, creating this new developments. It's inside the city of Santa Fe. It's called Nueva Acequia. I'd be happy to present that to you sometime if you want. So it's zero-sum energy use and zero water use as part of that in terms of a recycling systems. That's the only way we're going to be able to house our people with water. Water's life. There's no way we can't do anything about it. But if we do the same kind of thing we're doing now, we're going to water faster, quicker than we are in terms of providing water to those who need it the most. That's my answer.
Well, thank you very much.
Steve?
I've got a couple questions, basically about your chart. I guess it's this one here. But first, let me say that I totally agree with you about this car-oriented development that we like to do around here. We seem to be able to say, well, we can build a lot of houses, we can build parks in the houses, in these developments. That's really nice. But we don't allow or demand that we have grocery stores there, or churches, or any kind of commercial kind of thing. El Dorado, for example, I think is a perfect case. Up until about 15 years ago, there's nothing out there to buy a gallon of milk. Now there is, finally. But when that development was put in place, that kind of thing should have been thought about at that time. But I want to ask you
Mr. Chairman,
about some of your
Commissioner, can I
specific...
speak to that moment for a moment? Because I believe you're absolutely right. And when the SLDC was created, for some reason, I couldn't find any data or any analysis indicating most new general plans come with a commercial component. And it's more than just, hey, we need this much commercial space. It's what household, if you want these businesses to survive, if you want restaurants, or if you want a grocery store, you have to have this many units in this particular area in order for them to survive, or else they won't. That was never done. So we have, one restaurant out in our most dense area right now, which is the Community College District. There's one restaurant, right? One business, right? There should be 50, right? But to get to 50, you need the households, units, and you need the population around to support it, or else you're never going to get those nice coffee shops, or if you do, you're going to have people driving to them, right? We could do something like downtown Subsistence easily, because a lot of people that can watch us walk there.
Oh, absolutely.
But
And I
you,
mean,
you can't have that unless you have the density of units right next to you.
well, the density is one thing, but even where you have fairly dense development, we just, reviewed a plan here a few months ago for this fairly good-sized development just off of Highway 14. No stores, no shops, no churches, nothing. Just houses and parks. That was it. And I think
If
that's
the same
really,
development,
really
think of it,
typical
that was
of
only
what we
5
do
units
here.
per acre, right? That was the density. It's not Filey House. That's my point. It's a paradigm shift. 5 units per acre won't get you anywhere.
I don't really, density, I agree with you about density, but that's not the only thing that keeps a business running.
Oh, no,
I
but
mean, you have to
You can't
have-
have it without it.
Right. Let me ask you some of the questions I have about some of your numbers here. So if we look at your chart here, and let's just take out for a minute the land costs per unit. The rest of the costs here, how do they compare to other locations in the nation?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, so our costs relative to New Mexico are way higher, generally speaking. And because the nation is so big, right, so our costs are minuscule compared to developing in Los Angeles.
Right.
But we're really, expensive in, for instance, we looked at some towns. We looked at towns around our same kind of size, right, and metro areas kind of size. There's places in Ohio that were half this cost, and they're putting up units right now at $150,000, brand new, right, and at 3 units per acre, right? No cost of land. The counties provide the infrastructure. It's a different model, but God, even the materials costs. Most of our materials come out of Albuquerque, but there's nothing being produced in Albuquerque. So it's actually shipped to Albuquerque, and then we drop ship it down here, right? That's an expensive transportation system to be able to get those kind of materials costs.
You have a cost here called soft costs, 20%. What is in that?
Architects, engineers, surveyors, financiers, all the things it takes to get to the point where they can actually provide the development to you, overhead costs, things of that nature.
So if I'm going to build a house, let's say in the county here somewhere, and I've got an acre of land, well, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to have probably a minimum of 5 to be able to build somewhere in the county here. But let's just say I had an acre of land. You're telling, and you know, you're saying, well, it's architectural costs and these other ones that you listed. Aren't a lot of those costs sort of required because of the rules that we put in place?
Bingo. Yes, absolutely.
In other
So-
words, we're
so consider
saying-
what rules you're putting in place.
We're saying we want 20 pages of plans, of which a site plan, and it's got to be approved by an engineer and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We could drive down the costs of building by looking at some of those requirements.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, 2 secondary costs, and if you just hit it on the head. One is the cost of time that it takes to get through development review, right?
Yes.
So if you're paying right now, at the best money you can get right now is 7.5, 8% interest monies for carrying costs. If it takes you 6 months, it costs this much. If it takes you 2 or 3 years, it costs way, way more. So that's one thing. So that's one component that needs to be looked in terms of what is the timing, what are the systems that we use to be able to get through processes. The other issue is what is in the process itself that can raise the costs that we may or may not have to do with, right? Do we or do we not, and I'm not here to answer that question one way or another, but do we not have excessive amounts of overview relative to what we're looking for? Some would argue that we don't have enough, some would argue we have too much, right? There's a debate about that. Can we do that more efficiently is the real question.
Then finally, land costs themselves, $100,000 per unit here. How does that compare to the rest of New Mexico?
Mr.
And I know New Mexico's a big difference between, but let's just say the corridor, the Rio Grande corridor. How does it compare in there?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, the only place that we saw had higher land use costs were Los Alamos, land costs were Los Alamos, which there's almost nothing for sale, so it was even difficult to do that. So there's no other place within the New Mexico that we could find had lot higher raw land costs.
So is that because of speculation?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, there's actually quite a few reasons for that. High demand, we have high demand, we have low availability. Where you put infrastructure goes up in value because there's not any place else putting infrastructure. And there's some kind of systemic issues we can't do anything about. So as of, for instance, capital cities around the United States have higher housing costs and higher land costs than non-capital cities. It's just a function of having a lot of government here, right? Another issue is tourism, right? I'm sorry, not tourism. Second home kind of, second home buyers or third home or fourth home buyers tend to raise the cost considerably because they're able to purchase properties, but their income isn't based in the economy itself, right? So they can bring outside economic functions to the county, build high, right, without necessarily having anything to do with the local economy. And so therefore the local economy can't absorb and is not a part of that system of both wages and housing prices going up in a similar pattern. And so that's yet another reason why land costs tend to be high. And you know, if you look right now, we have less and less available land, right? We put an enormous amount, and I think rightfully so, and I'm supportive of it, of value in terms of open space. But what I consider open space is more kind of vast areas by which can be enjoyed by many people versus open spaces in somebody's backyard, right? So what we have to do is really consider what is valuable open space that can be enjoyed by all and kept permanently open for generations to enjoy versus having lots being only 50% filled, right? That makes no sense. Like, why would I have half a lot there that you can't develop? Because, well, it's open space. It's like, really, you could put 4 more units on it. So we intend to increase the value of our land, because think about it. If we have a 50% open space requirement, by definition, right there, my land is twice as expensive any place else, because 50% of the land that I'm buying can't be used for development. Right off the bat, we're increasing that value considerably. And so, by definition, our land sales prices are going to be considerably higher. Now, if we pooled where the open space should be, right, and it was commonly owned, that would be of greater value than somebody's lot.
All right. Wendy, please go ahead.
Yeah. When you were talking about water recycling, how do you see that being implemented? Would that be a requirement for a developer for a higher density per acre to have? I mean, what would be the incentive to actually have that amount of recycling?
Chairman Gonzalez, Commissioner, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, right? And there's many of those who disagree with me, but I think we're going to end up and should be ending up in a world where every development, no matter where it is, should be able to have a minimum both use in terms of water usage and water recycling systems. That's the world we live in, and we can't escape that. We can't just wish it away. We can't just say it's not happening. We can see in front of our eyes. I can see my lands turning to dust. This is the reality we live in, and we have to be able to kind of change the way we use water and the way we value water right
Yeah,
now.
I agree. I'm just wondering what the incentive would be for a developer to include that as part of their development.
Chairman Gonzalez, I believe, again, personally, that we should make it mandatory for everyone at some point, right? Now, we have to provide the necessary incentives, right? So we have the same thing relative to affordable housing, right? Well, we tell people they have to provide affordable housing, right? But we don't provide the incentives necessary to be able to do that, right? So the affordable housing plan has a whole host of different incentives that we're proposing from a land use perspective that will say, listen, we want to make it easier for you to provide the affordable housing. We don't want to make it easier to pay us money because we don't get our value back on it. We want to make it easier for you to provide what you need to provide this housing that we need for our people here. And the same kind of incentives should be in place for environmental issues, right? I have the sustainability office in my department also, and so we really want to promote the ability for people to live sustainably. If we don't use our water sustainably, if we waste it, none of us will be here, right? This will be a wasteland.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to say a couple things here. Joe, one of the other issues that it's as far as affordable housing and development is sewage. We have that. We have a benchmark basically with a NMED with 3/4 of an acre for a septic tank. So that's why everything revolves around the water and sewer availability. So is your new plan that you have come out, is that going to have some ideas of what to do about sewer, or how we're going to get around that, or is there some idea other than wastewater treatment facilities and stuff like that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you again for asking that. So you're absolutely right, and I think appropriately so in terms of where we can provide densities and where we can't. There's huge swaths of the county that we couldn't and shouldn't provide higher density development, right? Or the minimum densities are actually defined by NMED, right? Because if you put in a septic tank, you have to have enough area to percolate. That's a health and safety issue. That is nothing we should be messing with in my mind. That is not the issue. But where we do have water and sewer is where we need to take advantage of it. And in addition, right, so I'm talking about, of course, the areas in the metro area, and in addition, we need to substantially invest in upgrade in those communities that have been there for generations and generations to allow them to economically live. So I'm talking about Cerrillos, Madrid, Galisteo, Glorieta, where they are set communities, right? But they're lacking the necessary infrastructure to be able to assist in helping them continue to grow or maintain themselves, right? And boy, you know, we need to invest in terms of providing water and sewer to places like Madrid, where we have communities as a whole, right? And let's maintain those. Let's enhance them. You know, there's nothing more great than, from my mind, than going down and enjoying Madrid during festivals and things of that nature. Or if you're Charlie, you go down there in the middle of the night for I don't know why you're at the bar, but that's not going to survive unless we invest in their infrastructure. So yes, the vast majority of the Santa Fe County is not going to have that. Only particular areas. And again, quite frankly, a huge swaths of Santa Fe County, I'm a firm believer in keeping open, right? We have large ranches. Let's make sure that they economically can sustain themselves and continue to be large ranches so we can enjoy the open space that they provide, right? Let's make sure that we enjoy those kind of things rather than letting them be piecemealed out at 1 unit or 2.5 acres, right? That's what we should have be avoiding and say, no. We want to keep you open space. We want your land holdings to stay in place. Let's transfer those abilities to do density here where it belongs, right?
Okay, do any of the other commissioners have any questions? Okay, thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Vicky, do we have to take any kind of action on this, or is this just for our information?
Mr. Chair, it's just an information item.
Okay. Joe, again, Joseph, we'll be looking forward to your full presentation when you get together. Thank you very much. Okay, let's continue. The next item is item A. It's case number 22-5180, TT2 LLC, applicant New Mexico Land Solutions, LLC agent requests a variance of chapter 8.10.3.13. John Lovato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. TT2 LLC, applicant, New Mexico Land Solutions, LLC, agent, requests a variance of Chapter 8.10.3.13, Table 8-38, Dimensional Standards Employment Center, to allow a workforce complex to exceed a height of 30 feet and a variance of Chapter 10.21.2 units to allow more than 12 units per building to create a workforce affordable housing complex and mixed commercial development on 17.40 plus or minus acres, 2 lots. The workforce housing complex will contain approximately 240 housing units with 8 apartment buildings. The commercial development will consist of 5 lots with uses such as restaurant, retail, and commercial pad sites geared towards the allowed uses in the CCD Employment Center zoning district. The site is located at 4585 and 4587 State Highway 14 and within the Planned Development District, Santa Fe Community College District, CCD, within the Employment Center District, within Township 16 North, Range 8 East, Section 24, Commission District 5. Summary. The applicant proposes to create a total of 240 housing units on 17.40 acres. The applicant proposes to construct 8 3-story walk-up style buildings. However, the height of the structures exceed height requirements and the buildings will have more than 12 units per building. The applicant does not yet have a final design, therefore they are requesting a variance to allow up to 100% of the buildings to be 38 feet in height. The applicant's proposal illustrates 24 to 36 units per building, therefore the applicant is requesting a variance. The proposed access is directly off Highway 14 with 2 24-foot wide roadways and contains a looped internal road network that serves the entire project. The applicant has submitted schematic drawings to show what the development could potentially look like. The schematic plans illustrate a park, mixed uses, parking for the structures, and landscaping in and around the project. If the applicant's variants are approved, the applicant intends to subdivide the lots into a total of 7 lots for the uses proposed and submit an application for an administrative site development plan approval for a multifamily housing development. The applicant will be required to comply with the standards in the SLDC for site development plan approval. The applicant states TT2 LLC is proposing a first-of-its-kind residential project within Santa Fe County, which utilizes 4% low-income housing tax credits and for 60% area medium-income households. The project will consist of 240-unit multifamily affordable housing community in Santa Fe County. If the requested variances to the SLDC dimensional standards are granted to ensure that the project is both economically feasible as well as delivers the goal of providing essential affordable housing units to Santa Fe County. The applicant further states, based upon the project description, summary, with the granting of the variance to the Santa Fe County Sustainable Land Development Code, TT2 would like to present Santa Fe County with a proposal that will help provide relief of the current affordable housing crisis and relief in the workforce housing 100% affordable housing development project. On November 10th, 2022, the Santa Fe County Sustainable Land Development Code hearing officer met and heard this case. The decision of the hearing officer was to recommend approval of the applicant's request. The basis of approval were the following. Height. Even without a variance, a building in the CCD EC zone may be 36 feet in height, 25% of the footprint. The developed variance is not substantial increase in permitted height. Additionally, the evidence shows that there are several developments in the area of the subject property that exceed the 30-foot restriction. Units per building. The proposed project is between two highways in condition that cannot be changed and limits its usefulness. The requested variance is not contrary to the public interest and provides additional affordable housing options in constrained market. At the November 10th, 2022 hearing officer, at the November 10, 2022 hearing, one of the members spoke on the case. The concerns from the member was the public were due to access and water. The applicants have addressed the variance criteria and staff has responded to applicant's response as contained in the memo. Recommendation. On November 10th, 2022, the Santa Fe County Sustainable Land Development Code hearing officer met and heard this case. The decision of the hearing officer was to recommend approval of the applicant's request. The basis of approval were the following items. Height. Even without a variance, a building in the CCD EC zone may be 36 feet height for up to 25% of the building footprint. The requested variance is not substantial increase in permitted height. Additionally, the evidence shows that there are several developments in the area of the subject property that exceed the 30-foot restriction. Units per building. The proposed project is between two highways, is a condition that cannot be changed and limits its usefulness. The requested variance is not contrary to the public interest and provides additional affordable housing options in a constrained market. Staff recommendation. Height. Chapter 8.10.3.13, Employment Center, Subdistrict Development Standards, Table 8-38, the max height is 30 feet with 36 feet allowed for up to 25% of the building footprint. In addition, in order to allow for denser areas of development, 38 feet in height for the entire housing component will allow a higher density and more units. Therefore, staff supports the requested variance. Units per building, Chapter 10, Section 10.21.2 states that there shall be no more than 12 units per building. However, multifamily include apartment complex and in surrounding locations in and around Santa Fe. The majority of apartment housing complexes are 2 to 3 stories in height and contain more than 12 units per building. Staff supports the requested variance. Staff and the hearing officer recommended approval subject to the following conditions. Mr. Chair, may I enter those conditions into the record?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, and I stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you there, John. Do the commissioners have any questions of staff? Frank?
Yeah, I have a question about the criteria for giving the variances. And we've just heard that what these folks want to do is exactly what needs to be done. And I totally agree with that and support that. The problem is that that's not what the rules allow. And it's hard to say that this is an extraordinary or unusual circumstance. This is something that Joseph Montoya just told us it's been coming clearer and clearer and clearer that this is what needs to be done. Doesn't it need to be done by ordinance rather than by variance?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Katz, I do agree with you. However, the variance procedure is the affordability of allowing this to proceed until such time we can accommodate those changes into our ordinance. That being said, this is a funded program, I believe, and maybe Mr. Montoya can speak to that. But timing is of the essence, and this is why the applicant is coming before you right now as we speak.
I appreciate that, and that's why I will vote in favor of it. But, you know, it is certainly tempting to say, Commissioners, get it together, do it. Solve these problems, change the zoning density, change these rules. If that's what we want, it should be in the ordinance, not piece by piece. Oh, yeah, we could build it taller because there are others that are taller. And pretty soon, none of the rules apply anymore. And that distresses me.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Katz, if I could also address that question. So the issue with this project isn't the density in this particular case. As you're probably aware, the Community College District is the county's primary growth area. So rather than maximum densities, in most areas they set a minimum density to try to achieve as many units as possible. So the density isn't necessarily the issue on this project. The standards that were developed for buildings within this area, which they were seeking a variance of the minimum of or maximum of 12 units, and then the maximum height limitation. We actually haven't had an apartment project come in Santa Fe County under the SLDC. So this is kind of a test case, and we're starting to see, based on these variance requests, that there may need to be some changes in the code to the design standards, just based on the goal of the CCD as the primary growth area, to allow the densities that we're seeking within those areas.
My guess is that if we said no here tonight, maybe it would encourage the county commissioners to get working. But I know that that's not where we want to go, but it's tempting.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Steve?
I want to talk about height also. So what's the ceiling height in these apartments? This might be a question for the applicant, if that's in order at this time.
Steve, hold on a second. Let Joe speak first, and then we'll go to your question, okay?
Well, then I have a question for Joe. I'll save my question about height in a minute.
Thank you, Steve, I appreciate it. Go for it, Joe.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I do want to make clear, the variance that we're seeking is not for affordable housing, right? There is nothing in the code that allows you to provide a variance for affordable housing, so we want to make it clear. The code specifically states that you get a variance for hardship, right? And in this case, we did a very, very detailed economic analysis that these units can't be built unless we have these variances, right? It's impossible to be done. And that's the hardship. The hardship in this case is an economic hardship. They won't be done. They simply won't be done. And just so you know, I know a lot about the financing side of this development because I'm trying to attempt to finance them. So I know a lot about in terms of the cost per units and things of that nature in order to get that place. And there's no way they can be done to be built in order to meet, remember, we're using federal low-income housing tax credits, which mandates the affordability, both period and type of people that you can afford, that you can rent to. There's no leeway there. That's it. You can't do above that. You can't just kind of smooth it or things of that nature. So your cost components when you're building are extremely tight. And then therefore we get these variances. We wouldn't have asked for the variances if it wasn't an economic hardship. So just to be clear, you're not, if you so choose to provide a variance, it's not because it's affordable housing. It's because there's an economic hardship that doesn't allow you to do it in the first place.
Mr. Chairman?
Frank, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I would. The exception criteria or the variance criteria is that it's a hardship on the owner. This is not a hardship on the owner. This is a hardship on the city, on the county, on the community to not have the affordable housing. The owner can develop this property in some other way. It wouldn't provide affordable housing. It might be commercial because there's an awful lot of commercial there and you're between the two roads, so probably not ideal for residential. But it's not on the owner, the hardship isn't.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes, it is because, just so you know, there's a difference between the landowner and the developer, right? So the landowner in this case is not the developer. There's a third-party developer that this is what they do. They develop low-income housing tax credit apartment complexes. It can't be done with them. So it's a hardship in that, well, I'm sorry, we can't do it. That's the hardship. It is an economic hardship that if this doesn't pass, it simply won't be done. Now, the effect of it is really negative. The effect of it is really negative. But and I don't know if we're mincing words here, but the economic hardship would be, well, sorry.
Lawyers mince
do it.
words.
Yeah.
Lawyers look at it, says hardship on the owner. It's not a hardship on the owner, you're telling me it's a hardship on the developer. And I'm saying it's a hardship on the community. That's not what the code says. That doesn't allow us to give a variance on that basis. We will, but
Yeah.
it's,
Mr. Chairman, just, again, it's a hardship for the developer. In this case, the hardship would be, okay, we won't do it because we can't get the variances.
that's not what the variance criteria is, though. Not the developer, it's the owner. Thank you.
The owner of the developer.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Katz, if I can also kind of incorporate some information. This area is a prime area for development, as Ms. Lucero had stated. A lot of the issues we talked, or that was talked about earlier, such as the sewer and water, which are components in this, are already within the location, in the prime location of this spot. If this tries to go up in San Marcos, that might be an issue. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, Steve, you had some questions?
Yeah, this is to staff. So in the hearing, you noted that the concerns from a member included access. And I want to talk about access. This is on this crazy Highway 14, 4 lanes to 2 lanes disaster that keeps coming up here. Now, you look at this, where this occurs, this property occurs. And it is, we've got a stoplight here at Rancho Viejo Boulevard. We got a stoplight now just put in this last year on Fire Place. This is right smack dab in the middle. You're talking about 2 24-foot wide roadways. And this is happening
I got it.
right in the middle of where you're going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. So, you know, what I'm afraid of here, and I'm not against the development, but I do want to make this clear to the county, that you guys got to get together with the state and figure out what you're going to do with that road, because this is going to kill somebody real soon. And having another major development, I mean, how many units are we talking about? How many people are we talking about here? Trying to go in and off of 14 in this 2-lane section. I can't imagine them trying to put another stoplight there. I mean, what's the planning here? I don't see that addressed at all by the county's recommendations.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Member Krentz, what you're acting here is on 2 variances. One is height and one's density, allowable in more density in a unit. What will be forthcoming is a site development plan, and what that entails is studies, reports, and assessments. Part of that studies, reports, and assessments will be water and so on and so forth, but the main one is traffic. So a traffic impact analysis will be submitted for this. At that point, if this doesn't meet the standards of those SRAs, studies, reports, and assessments, the variances are null and void and will not move forward until such time they can provide that documentation.
I'll hold my other question for when I can speak
Okay,
to the
thank you,
developer.
thank you, Commissioner Grants. JJ?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, one of the variances is, grant the variances, the height and the density. You know, the questions I have is, if the variances are granted, then they're going to immediately subdivide this property into 7 lots. So that means instead of 240 units on 17 acres, it's going to be 240 units on, the land minus the 5 lots. Now, those 5 lots, what are they proposed to do with those? I mean, the land-wise, how
Mr.
much
Chair,
land is that going to be?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gonzalez, what it's going to entail is everything will be incorporated within those lots, such as the geared pads geared towards, businesses, small businesses, or whatever type of business they bring that meets the area zoning, as well as the affordable units. So yes, you're looking at lots being split into pieces and readjusted, but at the same time, it's going to be all one component. We're going to be all one development. So it's not going to grant them the ability to put more units on per se each lot. It's going to grant them their ability for what their approvals are, and that meets our Sustainable Land Development Code standards, and especially in the community college district.
The other question I have, I'm very concerned about, 240 units between two major highways. The other thing is, that's the corridor coming into Santa Fe. I-25 is a corridor, and Highway 14, that's a scenic byway. How does it look to have big buildings there in the corridor coming into Santa Fe? That's what I'm concerned about. The density is just way too much, in my opinion, for that area. I mean, I support affordable housing, but the density is way too much. How many people are going to be living there? 240 people, 2 or 3 people per unit, that's 1,000 people. So that's what I'm concerned about, the density.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Gonzalez, so the question would be concerns with the actual number of people within the vicinity, or just the building infrastructure itself, or the size? Because the way these are designed, they're broken up in masses, and so you'll have offsets to make it aesthetically sound and looking better than what one solid structure with one facade, 36 feet tall, 38 feet tall, whatever the height may be.
Well, I'm concerned
So
about
that's the key.
the development between two major highways. Noise on the highways 24 hours a day. The rail runner running through there. I mean, it's a big concern there. It's a lot of noise, and I don't know how appropriate it is to have multifamily units in that area. That's one of my concerns. I have other questions, so go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Committee Member Gonzalez, I think the developer can speak to that. I'm here to act on the variances and speak to the variances, but I really take input from you, and I will also discuss that with the developer as well.
The other question I have is, they want, more than 12 units per building. They want 30 units per building. And I wonder, for the county, 12 units per building seems to be a reasonable amount, given the fire protection, the services available. A 30-unit apartment building is huge. I mean, 12 units, I think it's manageable for the understaffed fire department that we have out in La Cienega. That's the La Cienega Fire District. That's a concern, safety concerns.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we've reviewed this with the Health and Safety folks, Fire Department. They have no concerns about fire availability. Things that these will be built to all current fire standards, so that's not a concern of the Fire Department. I'm not sure, if this issue. Again, just to be clear, we're asking for 2 variances based on hardship. If these aren't considered, they won't be built. And so when we're concerned about density, then who are we not housing anymore? I just want to make that completely clear relative to my last things. I previously said, at a minimum, at 10 units per acre, unsubsidized, you're only housing 40% of Santa Feans. Where would we build these? Is there a place other than right now, because I don't know of any other place right now in the county that these could be built? Anywhere. So if it's not appropriately here, please tell us where that could be.
We're limited to where you can put that kind of density. That area is very suitable, for commercial buildings. The thing is that there are several commercial buildings in that area. Across the street, they have a lot of commercial buildings, so the developer isn't limited, with his development. He just has to have a different kind of development. And this affordable housing there, 240 units, is a little bit dense, a little extreme.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Member Gonzalez, if I may remind you as well that this is yeah, you're right. It's a residential, but it's also a mixed use, which allows for commercial component and allows for housing. And that's the way this area is zoned. So I just want to bring that to your attention.
I saw that, But, you know, what I'm concerned about is you have 240 acres on 17 acres, and then you pull out 5 commercial lots. Now it's 240 acres or 240 units on maybe 10 acres or whatever it is, you know, more dense. You know, there's not enough open space, not enough playgrounds. What are children going to do in that area? That's what I'm concerned about.
Mr. Chair, if I can let the developers answer those types of questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, JJ. Yeah, let's see what the applicant has to say.
Good evening, Commissioners. I do. Yes, Nathan Manzanares. I'm with New Mexico Land Solutions LLC, located at 915 Mercer Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico. All right, good evening, Commissioners. Thank you so much. I think that the presentation that I'm about to give is going to answer a lot of the questions that have been brought up. I have a brief slideshow presentation for you that's going to go into detail on the project. And Matt, if we can start that, thank you. All right, so tonight we're looking at the variances for the Santa Fe County Workforce Affordable Housing Complex. Matt, next slide, thank you. So as John and Joseph have mentioned, we are in the Santa Fe County Community College Employment Center, which is in SDA 1 of Santa Fe County, which is the growth area of Santa Fe County. Joseph's already said, you know, the challenges associated with developing these type of developments needs a certain level of infrastructure. This site provides that level of infrastructure. Next slide, please. So as John was saying, we're here for the variances of height and to exceed the 12 units per building. In addition, we are proposing 5 commercial lots, which is a requirement of the employment center to have mixed developments. So the aim here is to have an economic hub of a workforce housing to spur more commercial development within the area. If you don't have people that can afford to live here, how are they going to work here? And you see that trickle down. We don't have enough workers as it is. Everyone's constantly looking for them. So we're trying to find a solution to solve that problem as well and provide commercial amenities to the area of the community college, Santa Fe County, and southern part of the city. Next slide, please. Here we have a 3D rendering, which is conceptual, but gives you a good idea of what we're asking for. So we will be having offset buildings. We're not going to have a 38-foot straight building. We're going to offset it. We're going to make it look nice. It's going to fit with the character of the surrounding area. And more importantly, it's going to help tackle this crisis that we're facing. Earlier, Joseph read off a stat that was pretty alarming. 2,000 people are currently on a wait list to seek affordable housing. Our project alone can reduce that number by 10%. That doesn't sound like much, but that's life-changing to the people that are going to be able to live here. Next slide, please. You know, there's been some questions on this being justified and in the spirit of the SLDC. You know, one of the main goals of the SLDC is to provide and ensure a diversity of housing choices, that it's available to residences with a wide range of economic levels and age groups. I'm in an age group right now. I'm extremely blessed and fortunate to own a home in the county. A lot of my peers aren't. They've left. They're gone. Colorado, Arizona, Las Cruces, they can't do it. It's getting to the point where the only way you're going to get a house in Santa Fe is if you inherit it from a loved one that passes. That's just the harsh reality that we're living with. So we think that substantial justice can be done, and this is in the public interest to have this affordable housing. It'll help everyday workers, locals alike, and it'll help maintain the culture of Santa Fe and keep people that were born and raised here, they can still stay here. They don't have to move away. Next slide. I'm going to go over some conceptual drawings in nature. We can't give you 100% designs until we get these decisions rendered on the variances at hand. We have put a lot of thought into this, and we're pretty close, but there are still those wild cards, and we need to iron that out before we can come back for our administrative site development plan, as John said. At that point, we will sufficiently have our experts, our engineers in traffic, water, our civil engineers look at all the issues that, could potentially be brought up, but ultimately will have to be resolved before a building permit or a development permit is granted by the county. Next slide. This is probably one of the more, crisp drawings of our development. As you can see, we do have the 5 commercial lots fronting State Road 14. We will obtain access permits from DOT. We will have scoping meetings with DOT on the next phase of the project. We can't get to that next phase without a decision being rendered tonight. There is an area in the middle there. Matt, I don't know if you could zoom in, but in the center, we have a clubhouse with amenities. We're going to be doing a substantial amount of landscaping. We have a community plaza area, which is a requirement of the CCD. So there will be amenities for kids, for the residences in the area. And this is geared towards, families, teachers that are just trying to get by below the median housing income in the county, first responders, things like that. Everyday people that enjoy, the Santa Fe life but are being squeezed out of it. Next slide. Here's a 3D rendering that shows the potential layout of the affordable complex in question. As you can see, we're going to be doing some landscaping. We're going to be doing soundproof walls along the highway there. We're going to be doing, things to minimize sound. We're also going to be doing a lot of internal trails and a really good trail system. Next slide, I'll go into that on this next slide. Oh, actually, we'll jump. Matt, if you could, please zoom in to the top right corner of that building. I want to talk about height. So the proposed buildings have a range of 34, 36, and 38 feet in height. That helps break up the facade of the building, and it has a better line of sight. A question was brought up earlier about ceiling heights. It looks like the average ceiling height here is about 10 feet or more. In height, we're going to maintain, a Santa Fe style. We'll go with those consistent earth tones to complement the gateway into Santa Fe. We'll do that willingly. And that's also, I believe, a requirement of the code as well. Next slide, Matt. One of the big, in addition to affordable housing, we have a really good plan to help reduce carbon footprint as well as help the residents in the area continue to utilize the vast trail system within the CCD. As you can see here, this is taken from the county's trail interactive map. There's a multiple use of multi-purpose trails. We're gonna, next slide, Matt, please. Our ultimate goal is to provide a trail to the 599 and I-25 Rail Runner Station. We're in talks with DOT right now about obtaining the approvals to do so, but ultimately this will provide the opportunity for people living here to not rely on cars, to have the opportunity to use the Rail Runner to go to work downtown or other parts of Santa Fe. There's multiple stations around the town, as you know. So that's another, huge part of this that we're trying to provide to both the residences of our development and the community of Santa Fe. It helps get people off the highway, off of 14, and it tees up to a decommissioned off-ramp on DOT down by the Rail Runner station that, like I said, keeps a lot of flow off of 14. We don't want that either. Next slide. So with that, I thank you. I thank staff, for, like Vicky said earlier, we have the fortunate of being the guinea pigs here, of proposing this type of use. It's a permitted use in the CCD, so therefore we will be going forward with a administrative process. We're glad that we got to show it to you prior to that through the variances. And with that, I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Does the commission have any questions of Jonathan? Steve?
Back to heights. So you said that the various finished heights they weren't just one uniform set of heights.
that-
What were they again?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Krenz, Matt, can you go back to the building slide there? They range, sir, from a range of 34, 36, and 38 feet height. And the aim on that is to get,
Yeah, okay, 34 feet is the lowest. All
Yes.
right. Now, explain something to me. So you say you want to do 10-foot ceilings, okay? Why is that such a important component for affordable housing, or for not affordable housing, but for, well, yes, affordable housing or necessary housing?
well, one, it makes it feel like you're not crammed in a tuna can.
Well, I understand that.
So just because it's an affordable unit doesn't mean you shouldn't have the amenities of having a nice place to
Yeah,
live.
but
We don't want to
I
cram
would look
people
at
in
it
there.
this way. If I were a builder and somebody said to me, this is the maximum height that you can go, I'd work backwards from there and try to figure out how
Oh,
to
and,
do
and
it.
we did that.
Well,
And
you know
under
you
strict
didn't, because you
adherence
got
to the
10-foot
code,
ceilings.
we are only allowed to do 80 units, making this project impossible to do.
No, I'm not
Increasing
talking about
costs-
density. I'm not talking about
No,
density.
no. We're just saying that if we're here to provide 100% affordable units, the first of its kind, instead of the 10, 20% that usually comes along, we're going to go all out. We're going to make the most of this opportunity, and we're going to get as many affordable units as we can. And this design provides that. It's a permitted
You're
use out
missing
here.
what I'm saying. You're
I
missing
do,
what I'm
but
saying.
we did look at the
It
strict
might
adherence
be
to the
nice
code.
to have a 10-foot ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
But if requiring a 10-foot ceiling means that I have to somehow get a variance on height for the building, well, then that's maybe not such a great idea.
I think regardless, it would still be the same issue where the lower you go in height, the less units you get, and the more
Wait a minute, there's
expensive
still
it becomes.
3 stories. There's still 3 stories. You're not lopping off a 3rd floor somehow.
Now, Adam, you want to speak to this? Mr. Chair, Commissioner Krentz, I have Adam Silverman. He's part of our team here. I'll have Karen swear him in, but he can provide some insight on this, and Joseph's also going to provide some insight to this too as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I think you bring up a very good point, by the way, because having 10-foot heights doesn't affect density at all. And so therefore, why would you have more than an 8-foot ceiling in order to be able to come in with the height limits that you have? So I think that's actually a very good question. And I think the applicant was missing the point in this in terms of some of the aspects of it. So a couple things. So the issue is not only the height of the ceiling itself, right, but also the structural components of it. And so this is a wood frame building, so the structural components of it have it actually allow it to be able to provide higher height primarily because these units are so small. And so what you don't want to do is to be able to provide very kind of a smaller unit complex with less height reduction on it. And so I think it's a good issue. It does come down to design. Now, if it was just 8 foot for all 3 units all the way, because some of them actually, my understanding is some of them are in fact 8 foot, and depending on the topology of the unit itself, you'd still have to get a height limit for some of it. So because these are systemized in a certain way, that is generally why. So there's a system in place that allows it for framing and things of that nature. Therefore, the mechanics of it are cheaper, because, you know, if you're building a single-family house and you're lopping off 2 feet all the way off the top, you're actually going to save some money, right? There's no question. In a multi-story development where the structure itself is stacked like this, is actually less important. But I think you bring up a good question, like, well, if we're having 10-foot ceilings, why wouldn't 8-foot have it? You'd still have to have a height variance with even just 8-foot ceilings in some portions. And so that's why it's incredibly important to have having that availability everywhere. So I think the applicant did miss your point, and I get your point, because it's like, well, affordable housing, and there's this height variance issue. Why couldn't we come under it? Or in some applicants in the past, not here, but previous lives that I've lived, oftentimes, well, you try to go down, right? That leads to other negative issues, but that has been a concern for people. It's like, well, why don't you go down below grade a little bit, because where your grade is above has a condition also. So it's really the mechanics of the systems itself that allow for greater affordability, even with a higher height ceiling system.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but some of it still doesn't add up. Say you did a nine, pick the median. You did a 9-foot ceiling. You had another foot for framing. You're now talking 10 feet per floor. You're talking 30 feet. So where's the other 8 feet, 6 feet? Where is it all going?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kranz, I apologize. I misspoke on, if you zoom in, Matt, I don't know if that's the most you could get. That's actually the finished floor to the next unit. So there is room for mechanical equipment, for sprinklers, for things like that. So the exact ceiling height, I can't give you that, but per floor, we're looking at that height. I apologize. I misspoke.
Yeah, you made a point of saying this is a wood frame building, okay? When you're talking wood frame building, mechanicals like you're describing go in the joist space. There's not like not like an industrial building where you have a drop ceiling from some structural level up there.
Yeah.
So again, this gets to be, we decided to design it this way. And because we've decided to design it this way, we have to have a variance.
Well, as stated, you know, with the requirement, you would get less of the units, and also it doesn't provide for the type of offsets that we're looking at. We don't want to have a straight ceiling like that. We want to provide some character. We want to provide a good design for this.
Jonathan, I have a question.
Mr. Chair, it's Nathan.
Nathan, what's the height of the parapet?
Mr. Chair,
What are the parapet heights? Because you have different parapet heights.
I believe the parapet height is 36 feet. I can't see it from there. Let me get my laptop.
No, but I mean from
apologize.
the top of the roof, there's usually some leeway there. Sometimes buildings have 2-foot parapets, 4-foot parapets. They're all different sometimes. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no problem, Mr. Chair. Just bear with me.
This plan looks like you're showing your height to the top of the parapet.
And we are doing some screening for mechanical equipment that increases that, but I believe the top of the parapet is 36 feet, Mr. Chair.
So I guess my question would be is that, would you have to have, I mean, the parapet from the top of the roof to the top of the parapet to the top of the roof, do you have any flexibility there to lower it? Is it, I mean,
Mr. Chair, I'd have to look at that.
you might need the parapet high enough to hide air conditioning units or something. That might be an issue as well, but I'm just kind of curious about that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, you know, per the code, we do have to screen that height of the HVAC system on top of the roof. So unfortunately, our architect, DPS, is not here to address those questions, but we can look at them as we move forward with the administrative site development plan. And, you know, we're asking for the 38 feet as a safety net. Like I said, this is still in the design phase. If we can find a way to make it work, you know, we're not going to, that's the point we're trying to get across. We're not asking for a 38-foot straight line across So we're going to offset it as much as we can and play with design, but we want that 38 feet as a safety net.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Frank?
Yeah, I have a concern which comes from the many years I served on the Historic District Review Board, and so I'm very conscious of this Santa Fe style stuff. And I appreciate very much the offsets and all of that, but what I don't appreciate is 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 different facades that make it look incredibly busy. The Capitol Flats is not exactly beloved by the folks that I are on committees with. And I think that the height for those apartments is necessary, just as I think that the height for this. I look at this and I kind of see Flatbush. And, you know, but that's what urban density needs, and I understand that. But I hope that you can at least not have so many different colors, and I don't know whether we have any say over that, but give some continuity in the color of the facades. Don't try to make them each look like separate buildings, because they're not separate buildings, and it just looks busy and very non-Santa Fe. So I hope you can do that. When
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Krantz, I will pass that on to our design team. And you know, like we said, we want to be good neighbors. We want to take those things into account, and we want it to fit in. So we'll definitely look at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that wants to speak on behalf or against this project? Come forward. Do we have anybody on the internet? Vicky?
Mr. Chair, there are several people who are on WebEx, so if I could just ask if there's anyone who would like to speak, please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. Doesn't look like anyone's coming forward, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that being said, I'm going to close the public hearing. And what's the pleasure or more discussion from the commission? Anything? Frank?
Yeah, this is real tough because you hear both from JJ and Steve the sense of we don't really want Santa Fe to change. We like the small, low buildings. We don't want, as I say, something that looks like it came from Flatbush, Brooklyn. And yet, unless we have some areas of the city that have an urban density with buildings this tall, this close together, Santa Fe will not turn into the Santa Fe that we are thinking of when we think of what it was like when you were all growing up here. Because those people will be gone, as Montoya says. And I think that the Midtown project in the city is going to give one urban area, which will be helpful to get the density, to get the kind of affordable housing. I think in this area, I don't think that the Cerrillos Road entrance to Santa Fe is very beautiful. And I don't think it ever is going to be. There was the hearing before the city council last night on the old Pecos Trail and the development there, and that is preserved as the only sort of scenic entrance, and people will describe, oh, I live on the other side, but I come in this way because it's a, you know, and that's true, and I guess there's some excuse for saying, okay, let's not build big stuff there, but I think this is an area that big stuff can be built without ruining Santa Fe, and so I encourage us to support the variances. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Any other commissioners have any statements, any more discussion?
Mr. Chair,
JJ?
you know, I'm concerned about the variances. Some of the criteria for variances is, what I understand is a minimal easing of the code. And that is, what I consider here is not a minimal easing of the code. It kind of goes way beyond that, and it maybe nullifies the code. The code ought to be changed in order to afford projects like this. I support affordable housing, but the criteria we have to use is the minimal easing of the code, and it says, you know, they want 100% the height variance for a 30-unit building. That's one thing. The other thing is, minimal easing of the code is 12 units per building. They want 30 units per building, so that exceeds, you know, what the code says by 3 times, you know, so I don't consider this to be a minimal easing of the code. I think it just, you know, shoots the code out of the water. I mean, and the county commissioner should do something. County staff supports that there should be more units per building instead of 12 units per building, but the rules we play under is 12 units per building and 25% height variance. So I can't support the variances under these conditions. They should, the code should be changed in order to accommodate a development of this nature. That's my opinion.
Okay, anybody else here? Steve?
I recognize the need for the housing. That's not the argument. I get a little, my back gets up when somebody sort of threatens me by saying, oh, if you don't let us do this, then you're not in favor of solving the problem. I'm in favor of solving the problem. But I think, I agree that, you know, we have to play within the rules, and you can make a lot of changes in design and still end up with the same number of units, the same desire to fulfill the need. Also, the other thing, speaking about the way that this looks, this is about as far away from Santa Fe style as I can think of. So I would hope when they get around to the next phases of development, if they get there, that they try to make this look somewhat like the rest of Santa Fe is supposed to look like. Now, some designer might say, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, good for you. We have to realize, and I drive up and down 14 every day, this site that they're talking about is actually sort of on a little knoll. It's certainly higher than Highway 14 road itself. And when you're coming down I-25, this is really going to be there. It is really going to stand out. And so I think it's going to be very important that if this is built, the understanding needs to be that this is like a billboard for the city of Santa Fe. And yeah, Cerrillos Road has its problems, but you get to this long before you ever get to Cerrillos Road. So I have to agree, we have these codes in place for reasons. And I'm not so much with the density, I think that's important there because these people are going to be very isolated right there. That little trail they were talking about, I would venture to say that's better than a mile, mile and a half at least to the rail runner station from where they're talking about, maybe even more. So I have to say that I would really have difficulty supporting these. I would definitely like to see this kind of development going on, but something that's more sensitive to the situations that we have here in Santa Fe.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the, lot of the concerns, that are coming up, I think would be dealt with the administrative, with the site plan, the next step. So we wouldn't see how this development is going to look or, impact access or any of that until the site plan is finalized. So giving approval for these variances just gets them to that next step. And then at that next step, all those other issues will be evaluated. That's the way I look at it, and giving them a chance to show what the actual site development plan would look like.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Mr. Chairman, question. Does this group get to review the site plans?
No, that comes in through staff.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Krenz, this is a site development plan which is administratively approved by staff and by a review.
Okay,
So we wouldn't see, that wouldn't come back to us then.
okay.
Just staff, so it doesn't go to the Board of County Commissioners either?
Mr. Chair, Commission members, that is correct.
Can we put conditions on our approval?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Katz, yes, you can.
Any more thoughts, any more discussion?
Mr. Chair? If I might
Sure.
just bring a couple of technical issues to your attention. JJ, with respect to your concerns regarding significant variances as opposed to minor variances, just wanted to remind you that the code does allow for administrative approval of small variations. Any deviations in dimensions up to 10% can be administratively approved. So I think there is at least an understanding built into the code that variances, that come to you will likely exceed that amount. I just wanted to remind you of that particular provision. Another issue that you should be aware of is that variances brought to the Planning Commission must be approved by a vote of a majority of all members of the Planning Commission. And with 2 absences tonight, that does not mean that 3 out of the sitting 5 members can pass the variance, but the majority of the entire Planning Commission would be a vote of 4. And as to your question regarding conditions of approval, Commissioner Krenz, you can certainly impose under the code. You're entitled to impose certain conditions, and I'm not aware that there's any real limitation on the creativity you want to use in imposing such conditions, and bringing something back to you might be an option as part of your discretion.
Thank you. That make any difference to anybody? Nathan, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think we're willing to work with both staff and this commission and present a design prior to coming in for site development plan approval, so long as the height variances and the unit variances are granted. I think we could work together on figuring out a good color scheme as well as design. As we said, we're still in the design phase. We don't want this project to be in jeopardy of getting denied, because then we're going back to, basically, ground zero, and we're just adding more fuel to the housing crisis at this point. So, if that's the board's pleasure, we would, once we have the variance approvals, we would be willing to do a follow-up presentation of what we're going to get administratively approved through staff prior to submittal.
Frank?
Given from what JJ and Steve said, and I totally respect what they're saying because they're right, as far as meeting the criteria, we don't have the votes to pass this tonight. And, you know, if I make a motion, there'll be maybe 3 for and 2 against. That's not enough. Where do we go? I mean, that gives an opportunity to, and I guess I'm not comfortable just giving the variance without seeing more design effort. And so I think that if it goes the way I was describing, then it's kind of back in their court to come up with a design that's going to give us the confidence that this is not going to be a blight.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just
Steve, go ahead.
two procedural questions here. Is it possible to table something without prejudice? That's one question. The other question is, do these variances need to be approved, both of them all at once or individually?
And can you answer that, Vicky?
Mr. Chairman, you know, I don't think that we have the votes to pass anything, and so I think it's going to have to go over until maybe you have a full board, a full commission.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, the applicant is requesting action on both items. So that's, and from a staff perspective, I think that's a practical measure, a practical approach.
I guess we're confused that we can't get a majority anyway. We don't have enough.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, it would help if I made a motion to approve the application and grant the 2 variances. And see what happens to that motion.
Well, that's one. Mr. Chairman, I still have my question about tabling, because it seems to me, if we reject this outright tonight, then the door is closed. Whereas, is that not the case?
We don't have the vote to pass it or reject it,
Well-
is my point.
Well, if one of us does, we do.
No, we don't have enough. We have to have majority to do it.
Or,
Yeah, we have to have 4.
Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners, if you're not comfortable in making this decision tonight, or you do recommend a decision of denial, we will gladly appeal to the Board of County Commissioners. That way, both committees have a chance to look at this application prior to it being submitted for an administrative approval. I think that's a good part of course to at least let everyone get a set of eyes on it before it goes to staff for review, if the decision ultimately is approval for the variances. Thank you.
My preference would be to proceed on, if there is a second to my motion to approve, to proceed on that.
I'll second.
We have a vote?
Okay. Yes,
Is there a
there's-
question?
Go ahead.
well, he's-
Frank, to an assumption I think you made earlier, I believe, you know, staff and legal are of the belief that a 3-2 vote, to use your example, a 3-2 vote to approve would not have the sufficient votes to reject it, but that would constitute a, a negative vote. It would not simply mean that no action is taken. I think that would be considered a failure to pass or to approve the variances, and that would be considered a final determination by this commission and would be an appealable order. It doesn't require a
There's
certain number.
no motion. I mean, if we just sort of said, okay, we're not going to do anything else, we're going home now, that would mean it passes and goes on?
No.
Can't be right.
No, that sounds like a tabling that you're describing.
I'm talking about a motion that fails because it doesn't have a majority vote. So there's no action taken.
Well, I think that is an action. That is,
No,
It is
it's a
turning them
motion
down.
that failed. And, Steve could make a motion to deny it, and that would fail. And so we would, I think the normal thing is that you put it to the next meeting and you get a full board where you would have the sufficient votes to do something, one way or the other. I don't know which way. I mean, the other two people might just, sort of use hypotheticals, might be not in favor of it, and so it would be denied, or they might be in favor of it, so it would pass. But when you can't take any action because you don't have the full commission here, my understanding is that, well, wait till you have the full commission here, next meeting.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
perhaps that would give them time to come up with something better.
Mr. Chairman,
Steve?
I make a motion that we table this to a later meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to table it.
actually, Mr. Chair, you do have already pending a motion and a second. So unless that motion is withdrawn,
Okay.
I think it needs to be resolved one way or the other.
We'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, then, Mr. Chairman, I move that we table this to a later meeting so that we can get more information from the applicant.
Do we have a second on that?
I would second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Okay, so it gets tabled. So you can come back and work with the staff and the administration again.
Mr. Chair, I realize the motion has already been made and passed, but I think even in retrospect, it would still be helpful to the applicant to get some sense of what additional information you would like to see before they come back before you again.
Mr. Chairman,
Steve?
there's a couple things I would like to see. I would like to ask if they could please attempt to readdress the height issue. And secondly, if they could present to us a rendering or something that is closer to the Santa Fe style, or at least some sort of rendering other than the conceptual rendering that's been presented tonight.
And something with earth tone colors as well?
Yes.
Chair.
JJ?
The other thing I would like to see is on the density for the 12 units per building, I would like to see something less than 30 units per building. That's the other variance you requested.
I would also look at your parapet heights. Maybe you can do something on your parapet heights, and you don't need to have your parapet so high to hide things, and maybe you don't even need a variance. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners, we thank you for your time. We'll take your considerations into our design, and we'll correspond them with code compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move to the next case.
That's where it's going
You guys want to continue or take a break?
Just deal with this one.
to go. Yeah.
Okay. Case number 22-5120, Roybal variance. Sammy J. Roybal, Leonard J. Roybal, and Tessie N. Roybal applicants. Kenneth Quintana, case manager. Please proceed whenever you're ready, Kenneth.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, thank you. Sammy J. Riball, Leonard J. Riball, and Tessie N. Riball, applicants request a variance of Chapter 8, Table 843, Dimensional Standards, Existing Neighborhood, to divide a 2.69 acre parcel into 2 residential lots, one consisting of 1.337 acres and one consisting of 1.35 acres. The applicants are also requesting a variance of density to allow 6 dwelling units on one lot and 4 dwelling units on the other lot. The subject property lies within the Santa Fe Community College Planned Development District, existing neighborhood subdistrict, which allows for 1 single-family home residence per 2.5 acres. The property is located at 5, 6, 7, and 8 Old Galisteo Trail, SDA 1. The applicants are the owners of the property as identified by warranty deed recorded in the records of the Santa Fe County Clerk on March 16, 2007, recorded as instrument number 1475002. The 2.69 acre lot was created in 1975 by warranty deed recorded in the Santa Fe County Clerk's office under Book 322, page 217. The applicants received a district court judgment partitioning the property into 2 lots as recorded in the Santa Fe County Clerk's office, instrument number 1792411. The 2.69 acre property contains legal access off of Old Galisteo Trail and Rancho de Siesta, which is a privately maintained road. The applicants request to divide the 2.69 acre parcel into 2 residential lots, one consisting of 1.337 acres and one consisting of 1.35 acres. The applicants are also requesting a variance of density to allow 6 dwelling units on one lot and 4 dwelling units on the other lot. The property is within the Community College Planned Development District within the existing neighborhood subdistrict. Chapter 8, Section 810.3.18, Table 843, existing neighborhood of the SLDC requires a minimum lot size of 2.5 acres per dwelling unit. The agent states in April of 1987, Sammy and Tessie acquired 50% ownership interest in the property, with Leonard retaining the other 50% ownership interest. Soon after, it was agreed upon to physically divide the property to the respective sides. In 1986, a permit was issued from Santa Fe County for a single-family residence home issued to Leonard Roybal, permit number 86-475. Santa Fe County staff has conducted a site inspection on this property. During inspection, it was discovered that there were multiple residential units on the property. One structure contained 3 individual units, each with a separate kitchen and bathroom setup. Another contained 3 units with a kitchen and bath setup. In addition, there are 4 separate residential dwelling units on site. Overall, there is a total of 10 livable units on site. The applicants have not provided any evidence as to how this many dwelling units were constructed or renovated. There is no proposal to remove any units on site, and there are no plans for further development. County staff is able to recognize 5 units through aerial image date 1981. On November 10th, 2022, Santa Fe County Stand Development Hearing Officer met and heard this case. The decision of the hearing officer was to recommend denial of the applicant's request to divide and denial of density. At the November 10th, 2022 hearing officer meeting, there were 2 members of the public that were in opposition of this application. County staff also received 2 letters of opposition that were included within the report. In addition, there were 2 members of the public that were in favor of the applicant's request. The applicant has addressed the variance criteria and staff has responded as contained in the memo. The hearing officer recommendation was on November 10th, 2022. The Sustainable County Land Development Hearing Officer met and heard this case. The decision of the hearing officer is to recommend denial of the applicant's request. Staff's recommendation: the property is within the Community College Planned Development District within the existing neighborhood subdistrict. Chapter 8, Section 810.3.18 Table 843, existing neighborhood of the SLDC requires a minimum lot size of 2.5 acres per dwelling unit. The owners have applied for permits in the past for minor renovations and a new accessory structure. However, no permits to convert the dwellings on site into multiple units into multiple rentals were obtained. There has been no compelling evidence to prove that all 10 of the dwelling units on site were permitted or grandfathered in. Grandfather status can be made for 4 single-family dwelling units through aerial imagery from 1981, and a permit was issued in 1986 for a single-family home. Therefore, staff can only recognize 5 legal dwellings on the property. Staff's recommendation, denial of the variance request. If Planning Commission recommends approval of these variances, staff recommends the following conditions. Mr. Chair, may I enter these conditions in for record?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. At this time, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Kenneth. Does the commission have any questions of staff? Steve?
I have only one. If the request is denied, what happens to the people that are residing on these various properties? Is the county going to do something?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Krantz, if the application is denied by the Planning Commission, the applicants do have the ability to appeal the decision to the County Commission for their action. Otherwise, the tenants would have to be evicted, basically, and the 5 illegal dwelling units would have to be converted into or brought into compliance, whether it be removing kitchens, bathrooms, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth, I have a question. When I was reading here, it says the court order was for 1.34 acres, and now what they're proposing is a 1.337 and a 1.350. It looks like it's off by 3 thousandths.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Gonzalez, that could be an error, or I'm not aware if there was a physical survey performed when the judgment took place. I believe the applicant may be able to answer that question further for you if needed.
Okay, I can ask the applicant when the applicant comes up. Yeah, because it's now it's. Yeah, okay, we can do that. Okay, thank you. Wendy, I'm sorry.
Yeah. This is probably for staff. Is there a possibility for after-the-fact permits?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member, yes, a part of the conditions is if you do grant approval today for the variance request, they are to obtain 5 after-the-fact permits, as well as provide proof of permitting from OSE and MNED for the additional units on site.
Okay. The only comment I'll make too is that the amount of units they're asking for to be grandfathered in, I'm kind of concerned or confused because their 2013 survey that wasn't completed shows only 6 units there on their own survey plat that was done in 2013. But anyways, let's move on to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you were discussing exhibit number 3, is that correct? The proposal?
What's that?
Where you had making mention to exhibit 3, the survey?
I couldn't hear you.
The survey from exhibit 3?
Yes.
Thank you. That is their proposal. Mr. Chair, Commission members, we're going to be handing out additional documentation.
What was that again?
We are going to be handing out additional documentation.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Is the application, someone going to make a presentation?
Mr. Chair, I failed to mention that the applicant is present tonight and they'll be speaking on their behalf.
Okay, thank you.
Unlikely I'll be helping out, yes. Yes. Name and address, do you have?
Leonard Roybal, 310 State Road 76, Santa Cruz, New Mexico, 87567. What's that? I suppose. I wasn't.
Excuse me, I'm his wife. Right now, they're both hearing impaired, and they did not hear a thing of what was said. Well, he didn't. He keeps asking me, what did they say? So he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, so
That's what we're here for. This is our daughter. Go ahead. I can stay here.
basically we need some closed captioning up there for some of us people.
It's hard to speak for him to respond when he doesn't know what was said. Okay? Hold on. Let Sam speak.
Okay, Sam, go ahead.
We're not looking for any responses at this time. We're just looking for a presentation.
So we weren't told that we were supposed to do a presentation. We presented the last time. And so my name is Carmelita Archuleta. I'm Leonard's daughter. And I'm at 310 New Mexico 76, Santa Cruz, New Mexico, 87567.
My name is Sam Roybal. I live at 2610 East Hewlett Drive, Chandler, Arizona, 85225. Got up this morning at 4 o'clock to make the trip over here, so I'm a little bit tired, exhausted, I should say. But my wife and I acquired half interest in this property. There were 6 structures on this property. You know, some of them are probably multi-family, but the tax assessment, we're assessed as multifamily, have been. We acquired the interest in the property in 1987, so the structures were all there at that time. We have done improvements to the property and have gotten permits to do those improvements. When we acquired the property, there were 2 cesspools on the property, and we converted them into septic systems, and we obtained permits to do that. Most recently, we had a hay horse barn built, which was permitted. So I'm not exactly sure. We decided that we own the property, the 3 of us jointly. At our age, you know, our time on this earth is limited, so we wanted to leave our portion of our properties to our children, and that we obtained a judgment to accomplish the split, and we came to the county to see about getting, how can I say, recommendations from them to make sure that we were doing this thing correctly, and we were told to get a judgment, but otherwise it would be denied. And so we we're following the directions of the county, and I've always sought their guidance. And now all of a sudden, it's like nobody remembers that they gave us this guidance. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we just want to continue to live our life. There are, as they say, there are 6 structures on the property. My wife and I and our children occupy 2 or 3 of them, maybe 4, and the other ones are used as rentals to help with our expenses. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, my son Dax was born on the property. And you know, I wanted to tell you a few things that I know. You know, my brother Sam, when he acquired the property with me after I got a divorce and had to give half of the property to my wife for an X amount of cash, you know. And so Sam became my partner, you know, and as partners, we worked together pretty well. He wanted to get a loan so he could work on his side of the property, and I was having to co-sign the loan because all the property is on one piece. What?
It's one piece of property.
Yeah, it's just one piece of property. But now we divided it, you know, between ourselves. And when he wanted to get a loan, it was not a problem because I just co-signed the loan with him because we both own the property. Now we're trying to divide the property, and my daughter and my son would get my side, and his daughters will get his side, you know, when we all pass away. Now, I believe that if, an example, if my son decides he needs to remodel the house that he's in, he's going to have to ask permission of my daughter and his cousins. Now, there's going to be a lot of conflicts, I think, that are going to would arise if we are not allowed to split the property legally. You know, I sort of wanted to go into some examples of things that have happened in the past in my life, if that's okay. Is that okay?
What was that again?
Okay. You know, I grew up, I was born in Nambe at my grandparents' house. My mom went to visit my grandparents, and I happened to be 9 months at the time, so I was born there. My grandfather was blind, and back in those days, which was probably the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, women did not inherit any property. Always the men inherited the property. So my mom did not inherit any property in Nambe, even though she was an equal sibling of the family. One of my uncles had to go away to war. He went to the Navy to fight the war in the 40s, 45, 46, 47. So he was one of the brothers of the property, and he had a piece of property. And after he was in the Navy and retired from the Navy, of course, he went to California, made a living, and when he came back to New Mexico, there was no property left because one of the uncles ended up inheriting all the property. Now, I don't know what that has to do with anything, except that the times have changed, and, you know, the legal system has sort of changed with it. But I also had a cousin that bought my grandparents' house, but he did not get an easement to the house. So my uncle, who owned the property or inherited it all, would not allow him an easement to the house that he bought from my grandparents. So eventually he had to sell the house back. Well, he sold it to my uncle because he had to, not because he wanted to, because he had to because of, I suppose you would call it greed, I don't know. But I don't want that to happen to my family. You know, I want them to be able to live without any conflicts. And there are going to be conflicts, as everybody knows. I mean, there are 5 people there, and you all have a different idea of what you think is fair and what should happen. I'll go into another little example. I have a neighbor, I live in Santa Cruz, and we have irrigation rights in order to water our garden. The irrigation ditch goes through one of the neighbors' houses, and every time that I needed to, my wife would say, hey, you need to go bring the water in, we need to irrigate the garden. So I would go to the neighbor's house, and he had a shotgun with him, and he'd say, no, you can't get on the property, you know, to get the water that was legally ours. So I'd have to call the state police. The state police would come, and they'd protect me while I cleaned the ditch and finally got the water to the property. Those are just little conflicts that I sort of want to bring up, you know, that happen. Presently, my wife and I have a 911 address that it's 911. It's for a ambulance to be able to get to our house, the fire engine to get to our house. The person that owns that road locks all the gates. So we can't get, you know, if my wife has a heart attack and I call 911, the ambulance has to figure out how to break down the gates. There are 3 gates to get to the house to be able to, to save her life. Or vice versa, if I get a heart attack, she has to go through the same thing. And these are just little things that happen on properties. And, you know, like I say, I just don't want anything bad to happen with our family here because we are family. And I could go on, but, you know, and I've always been a coach, and I've always been an athlete, and I've lost a lot of games, and the only thing that counted is the next game. If you lose a game, the only one that counts is the next one that's coming up. If you won the game, the only one that counts is the next one coming up. You know, and I've always been able to adjust in my life because I've lost many games and won a few. So as a coach, it made me, I guess, okay, sorry.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Julianne Roybal, and I am obviously native of Santa Fe. And as Mr. Montoya mentioned earlier about how sometimes we have to leave because there's not affordable housing, there's not wages to make a living, I'm living proof of that because I've had to leave Santa Fe. When my grandmother passed away, my dad, you know, offered the house to all of us, and I wish back then I could have afforded that house. Unfortunately, we couldn't, right? I live here in Santa Fe in the summers, and as my dad mentioned, in one of the properties that we have as one of the units on our property. And one of the things is as my dad mentioned, he is, you know, as my mom and dad are aging, one of the things is we're wanting to create that family commune because they're going to get to the point where they're going to need to be taken care of. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to put my family in a you know, a home, and I want to be able to take care of them. And my sisters, the two of them here, you know, I don't have any children. My other sister doesn't have any children. Melissa does, you know, so she has a son that could possibly take care of them. So as we age, we want to create that family commune so that we can even take care of each other, right? And so this is one of the reasons why we're here today. This property has existed, as they said, since 1970. What was it, 5? And one of the things too, I know there was some opposition because people thought we were building brand new units. These things have been existing. And so I just wanted to give you my personal statement with that. And I live at 1949 East Los Arboles Drive in Tempe, Arizona. But as I mentioned, I also reside on the property. My hope is to retire in 3 years, come back to Santa Fe to take care of my family, and also be part of this community and work in this community and give back to where I grew up and come back to my roots. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing, you know, the property is actually serviced by a shared well. You know, we're concerned about the water issues and things of that sort. Our well is metered, and we send a report to the state engineer's office every 90 days to make sure that we're not exceeding what our well is presently servicing the units. We don't allow them to wash cars, you know, have a garden out, because we realize the value of making sure that we have sufficient water for personal and living reasons, purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Carmelita, I'm Lenny's daughter. The only thing that I wanted to, and I don't know that I can bring any clarification to this, but I feel like we're using the word units and structures like interchangeably, where I would consider a structure a building and a unit a livable unit, right? And so I think that when, in talking about this, I know I get a little bit confused when it's like, oh, well, there's 10 structures, or how did these 10 structures appear? And there's always been the structures that are on the property, the structures that were surveyed. But even during those surveys, there was never, I mean, I guess you could say an audit of the units to count how many units. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Okay, is there anybody else going to speak? That was it? Okay. Does the commission have any questions of the applicant? Frank?
Well, none of the applicants really of staff. There's this judgment of the division of the property that has happened already. Isn't that done? Is that something we need to deal with? Because there's already a judgment on that.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member, we are not acting on the judgment. The judgment is for the division of the property. We're here today because the density does not allow for that division.
But it was made by the judge.
The judgment, yes. However, the county's jurisdiction does not allow for that.
Isn't that a case of go tell it to the judge?
If I might, we have come across this issue before, and the distinction is that the court has full authority to partition the property as it did. What the court accomplished is simply fairly ephemeral. It's ownership of two different portions of one legal lot of record, and the legal lot of record status is what is significant here. They have two ownership interests, two parcels, even if you want to refer to it that way, but there remains only one legal lot of record, and their application is seeking to have the county acknowledge two legal lots of record. And the import of that distinction is that development can only take place on a legal lot of record. The ownership that the court ordered, or the division that the court ordered, exists, and the two applicants own their portion, the other applicant owns his portion, but from the county's perspective, at least as far as growth management and land use are concerned, it is one legal lot of record for purposes of assessing any development applications.
Are there development applications?
In place,
Have the owners submitted a development application to the county?
I'm not aware that anything is pending at this point, but Kenny would.
That is correct. Nothing is pending until the variances have been taken care of. If the variances are granted, they are to provide Exhibit 3 as the proposal for this division to be acknowledged by the county and approved.
I mean, I understand that the partition was done, often with a family when a bunch of family members own it jointly, and they don't want to own it jointly, they want it separate so that each can give their portion of it to their family, and it sounds to me like that's been done. I don't know, I mean, if we say, no, we won't grant a variance for maybe I'm a little confused. If we say we won't grant a variance for dividing the lot, to making it 2 lots of record, okay, is there another variance that they're seeking now? Density in what sense? Question. I'm a little confused.
Mr. Oh.
Is sort of the number of people living there, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Katz, it would be, they're requesting a variance of the density to allow more than one dwelling unit on each of the parcels if 2 parcels are approved, or multiple parcels on 1 parcel if the division of the land is not approved.
And the density out there, I believe, is 1 dwelling unit per 2.5 acres, right?
Mr. Chair, that's correct, yes.
Thank you. I do have a question of the applicant, maybe, then, is who's living in there? How many apartments are there? And who else is living there? Someone could come up and explain to me that? The materials say that there's some rentals there.
So 4 people here live there. Well, not 4 people, but they have 4 units. My brother lives there, so that's 5, and then the others are rentals.
So there are 5 rentals.
Yes. No? Yeah, it's 5 and 5. Yes.
So I guess when you say they're units, the 5 units that the family is living in?
Yes, 5 units that the family is living in.
They're separate units, they have kitchens and bathrooms and such?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify the facts.
And I think that you were getting to, like, what was the issue? And I think it goes back to what my dad was saying about my brother. Like, yes, it's separated by a judge, but at the end of the day, if my brother wanted to take out an equity loan to upgrade his unit, he has to ask, upon their death, he would have to ask me and my 3 cousins for permission to do that, and he would have to have us all co-sign.
Okay.
All right, I have a question. So are the people that are living there, are they paying rent, or are they living there because they're part of the family? So there's individuals that are paying rent out there as
Yes.
well, right?
As far as the family members that reside there, only one of them pays rent. The other two structures that we have on our side of the property are rentals that helps with our income to not only maintain and service those units, but to help us with our living expenses. So 2 of our units are rented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve?
So I'm trying to see if I've got this correct. There are 6 buildings, I'm not talking units, I'm talking buildings, on this property. And these 6 buildings have been there from at least 1986?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
I said, there are 6 buildings, and I'm not counting the barn and the sheds, 6 buildings. And these buildings have been there prior to 1981?
Mr. Chair, Commission member, that is incorrect.
When were they there?
By aerial imagery from 1981, we are able to identify 4 buildings.
So then you're saying that 2 buildings have been constructed after 1981?
In 1986, there was a permit issued for a single-family home. For the other structure, I'm unable to identify when that was permitted or built.
Okay, so out of the 6 buildings, 4 have been there prior to the code, essentially. 1 was built with a permit under the code, and 1 is there without a permit. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And then, now we've got 10 units. How are these spread out across these 6 various buildings?
Mr. Chair, if you can turn to Exhibit 4.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
The structures with a red roof minus the one in the middle towards the south are each a single-family home with a bathroom and kitchen setup.
Okay.
The structure to the southeast, next to the red roof, further to the furthest east, is also a unit or structure.
Okay.
The structures to the west, there are 3 in each, 3 units within each structure.
With the gray roofs?
I'm sorry?
With the gray roofs?
With the gray roofs, correct.
Okay, so there's 3 rentals in each one of those?
Correct.
Okay.
And your barn,
Now, then I guess this barn was applied for, when was that? That was, it's on here.
Mr. Chair, the barn was permitted in 2012.
Okay, 2012. Did the county go out there at that time?
Mr. Chair, Commission member, I believe a code enforcement officer would go out to the property to inspect. However, they do not enter the units unless requested. So all a code enforcement officer or an individual would see are the structures on site.
One of which you wouldn't know anything about because it wasn't permitted.
Correct.
And that didn't raise any red flags for the county at that time?
Mr. Chair, Commission member, I'm unaware of how that situation went.
Okay. I'm trying to take that map in Exhibit 4, and I'm trying to also then take this other map that shows how the land is divided. And I guess these, so I guess the properties with the separate living units, the the two gray roofs essentially, the one with 3 units in each one, they would be in one property.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair,
that's what
Commission
I'm
member,
looking
that's
at
correct.
Here, here, and here. Yeah. So that they would be in one of the properties, and the other property would have the 2 houses and the 1 residence furthest to the east that has, what, one rental, 2 in there, what?
There's 2 additional on that side, sir.
So 2 in that small building there furthest to the east. Okay. Now, I got a question, I guess, for the applicant. And I'll put up the question, and then you pick who wants to answer this. I think earlier you said that all of these structures are sharing a well.
That is correct.
Now, what are the plans if you divide these properties?
We will have a shared well agreement
Okay.
to continue to service the units. Another point that I wanted to bring up is we had provided a document to the county from Lenny's former spouse who is deceased, that she provided a document that there were 6 structures on that property prior to 1981. The county, we've gone to the county, we've asked for their guidance and assistance in that. We didn't realize that maybe, they're not really trying to, I guess, our feelings are we would go to the county to get guidance and assistance in that, and they would say, oh no, that document's not, it was a notarized document, but they say it's not properly notarized. So we kind of feel like, well, maybe the county is not really wanting to help us or to guide us, but sometimes we get guidance and we follow their guidance, and then it comes back and slaps us in the face.
So you're basically saying, though, that you
sorry?
you are basically saying that at some time prior to now, you presented evidence that there were 6 buildings on this property. And when was
Prior
that
to
again?
1981.
Prior
yes.
to 1981.
A
Okay.
notarized document, and the county says that document is
Okay.
not properly notarized.
Right.
Or, so we're like, what do we do? I mean, it's like, they're showing aerial photos, they're thinking there's 4 structures there. I have aerial photos that show there's 6 structures there, prior to the barn being permitted and issued. So, I mean,
Okay.
it's like, what do we do?
Let him continue to
Yeah.
ask your questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks. You answered my question. I was most concerned about the well.
Right.
And this document is very informative that you told us
And the
that. Thank
county
you.
is aware that it's a shared well,
Yes, or will be,
or
I
the state.
guess.
Right.
Frank, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have for the family is, were you around pre-1981 and related to that property, owned that property, or had some connection to that property? And if so,
Well, my property has owned that property since, I think, in 1975.
who owned it since 1975?
My brother Lenny owned the property, and his wife, who was deceased prior to, I think, in 1975.
Can Lenny testify to how many buildings were on the property and which ones of the ones that are shown there today they are?
Okay, what was the question again?
How many buildings were on the property prior to 1981?
Prior to 1981,
Yes.
There was the back house on my side, the front house on my side. There was the property that my brother Sam was living in. There was the 2-story house and the one behind your place. And I don't think the only one that wasn't there was the Shacaria, right?
It was in
No?
1981, all of them.
No, that was, they were all there, except for the barn.
The hay barn.
The hay barn, the barn that you built, that got permitted after, it was in 1992, I believe.
Thank you.
You done? Any other questions about the commission? Okay, Kenneth, did you want to say something?
Mr. Chair, Commission member, I do want to clarify as far as the OSC permit goes, they are approved for 6 residential dwellings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna close the, where am I at now? This is a public hearing. I'm gonna open it up for a public hearing. Is there anybody out there that wants to speak on behalf or against this application?
Yes, sir, I do. My name is Frank Mangine, and we live at 10 Las Tapias Lane. We're just north of the property. We're one property over from the property in question here.
Frank, may I swear you in, please?
Yes, please.
Do you swear or affirm that your testimony will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
My heart goes out to the family, and I understand how they want to provide for their families. We're just firmly against this change in the variance. My understanding is that it's already a violation of the zoning variance. Our concern is that there's no guarantee that there will not add new structures to the property. Our main concerns are this would be a precedent for others to do the same. I know keep talking about 6 structures. My understanding is that there'll be 10, 6 on one portion, 1.3 acres, and 4 on the other. I don't know where the other 4 structures came from. If in 1986 there were 6 structures, the other 4 came from somewhere. So I guess my other question is, the owners of the property don't even live on the property. 2 are in Santa Cruz, 1 is in Chandler, and 1's in Tempe. We live in the area. Their property is actually visible from our house. We're afraid that by expanding or authorizing this variance, we could devalue our properties and possibly, like I said, set precedents to other properties to attempt this action. Our area is low in crime, and we'd like to keep it that way. And we believe that moving forward with this would, if it did set precedents, would only increase the density of the area. We purchased this house because of the increased acreage per property. I'm not even sure who's living there, and I'm not sure if rentals are even legal in this area. That's what I have to say. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Anybody out there that wants to speak on about this project?
Mr. Chair, there doesn't appear to be anyone else from the public on WebEx.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing and go back to the commission. Steve?
Yeah, that was very interesting testimony, because I was reading through what was presented to us from the interviews, and there seems to be a real confusion here. Some people are confusing buildings with tenants. And we're talking about 6 buildings, which seem to have been there essentially forever. But now within some of these buildings, we have multiple tenants. And so that's where this number 10 comes from. It doesn't sound to me, and they're certainly not asking for some sort of development permit here or anything like that. There doesn't seem to be any kind of idea to add more structures here or anything like that, which seemed to be the thing that people in the neighborhood were most concerned about. It makes sense. But we do have a situation where we have multiple tenants in individual structures. And I guess that is not allowed in the county? Vicki, what is the situation there?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Krantz, so each dwelling unit, if you think about it as those structures maybe having 3 apartment units in there, there's 3 individual dwelling units. So that counts as towards the density that's allowed within
Okay,
this
all
area.
right. So you look at them as separate, even though they're a building, they're separate
Correct,
dwelling. Okay,
yes.
thanks for clearing that up. So my problem is, I guess if I had to like split the child here, what I'd like to see is I would like to see the properties divided, but the extra tenants gotten rid of. That would make the most sense to me. Now, that might be a financial hardship for the family, but the reason I think that that's an equitable decision is because essentially these structures have been there prior to the code. And so the density that we have of these 6 buildings on these properties here are there prior to the code.
Can I ask you a question? So are you saying that the buildings with the 3 units would be converted back to single family?
I guess that's what would have to happen, yes.
Frank?
That makes sense to me also. I mean, if the family wants to be there to take care of us old guys, and that's wonderful, but it doesn't need to be a separate dwelling unit. I mean, you know, a normal house, you have 3 bedrooms, you may have 3 bathrooms, but you don't have 3 kitchens. I mean, it's a family unit, and so I support what Steve has suggested as, I think, the equitable way of, okay, the property is divided so that the inheritance will work, and the buildings are allowed to remain, but there can't be the separate dwelling units in the building, inside a larger structure.
I guess a question I have is, especially any work that was done without permits and the house that was done without permits, if they're going to be using them as rentals and they didn't get permits, I'd be concerned about the safety of these structures, especially if they're rental units. I guess one of the concerns I would have is that, as far as density, we're here basically to rule on reasonable variance request. I think due to the intensity and the number of the issue of the number of people here, I think this is kind of getting us close to almost making a decision on a rezoning. I mean, we have a density out there of 1 dwelling unit per 2.5 acres. This is way over that. And that's just my comment for now. AJ.
Chair, you know what, and this is a very difficult case to have to decide. My concern is that there are 10 dwelling units within 6 residents, and the county has the affidavit we got here, and it's consistent with what the county determined, that there were 6 separate residents. And my concern is that they converted some of the residents into multifamily units. And I'm concerned that that density should not be allowed. I think these units were prior to 1981, before the code was adopted, then I guess they're grandfathered in. So what I would say, and I'm comfortable with, is that you recognize 6 dwelling units because they were grandfathered in, and the other 4 units or 10 units that they be removed. You know, that's kind of what I think. And as far as the lot split, well, you know, like Charlie says, you know, this is a 1 dwelling per 2.5 acres. And that's what it should be. And I don't know if we can really do that at this hearing tonight. I think somebody more authoritative than us maybe can figure out how to do this, but I think I'm comfortable with recognizing 6 units on the 2.5 acres. Thank you, Vicki.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a clarification? Based on staff's research and the aerial imagery that we looked at from 1981, we recognized 4 legal dwelling units on the property, and then they came in and permitted 1 additional one. So staff recognizes a total of 5, just for clarification.
Well, then I would refer, you know, that to say recognize 5 residential units and make it single-family residential units. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, JJ. Anybody else?
I would only point out to staff that that question of whether it's 5 or 6 seems to be under argument. I mean, the gentleman says, I gave you a piece of paper that said there were 6 units here, and I gave this to you quite a while ago. And for whatever reason, this wasn't recognized by the staff at the time. So, I mean, if you want to say it's only 5, and they're saying, well, I have reasons to believe that I showed you it was 6, that could get very dicey for the county.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's other issues out there as well. I mean, their septics, how many septics do they have out there? How many dwellings are allowed to tie into one septic? I haven't seen a sewer plan, a water plan. On the site plan, I didn't see well locations. I didn't see septic locations.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, as far as the statement that the applicant is making as providing documentation stating there was 6 prior to 81, that is the documentation that has been provided to you labeled as an affidavit. The county is not able to recognize that affidavit as it is not properly notarized. Reason it is not properly notarized, there's no seal from the notary, there's no county or city in which that document was notarized. For the septics, there's 4 septics on the property. I cannot tell you where each individual septic is tied into, and there's only 1 well on the property.
Thank you. Okay, are we at the point yet to more discussion, or are we ready to make a motion yet?
I'll make a motion.
Steve?
I move that we accept the variances with the provision that the multiple dwelling units be converted to single-family units.
Does anybody want to second that?
I would second that.
Okay, we got a motion and we got a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All against, say no. No. Yes.
Mr.
Can we get a roll call?
Mr. Chair, if I could, just before you do the roll call, Just to clarify, Commission Member Krentz' motion was for a total of 6 single-family dwelling units on there?
Yes.
And did that include staff's recommended conditions?
I'm trying to find the conditions. I didn't see any because you recommended disapproval.
It would be on page 7 of the staff report.
Page 7, okay. Find that. 7.
Although condition number 3 would need to be,
Here
well,
we go.
staff would recommend that it be modified for the one additional unpermitted residence to obtain a permit. So to change the number from 5 to 1.
From 5 to 6. Oh, 5.
That would be, yeah, condition number 3, I apologize. So condition number 3, staff would recommend that it read, after the fact, permits will be required for the one unpermitted home. And then condition number 4, we would also recommend that read, the applicant shall submit a valid well permit from the OSE to serve all 6 units.
Yes, I agree with that. Does the second agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
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 No. Okay, thank you very much for coming. The motion passed, you got approved, and good luck. Thank you all. Okay. Okay, next item is number 5, petitions from the floor. Any petitions from the floor? Nope, they're all leaving. Communications from the commission members. Frank?
Yes, this is my last meeting. I would like to thank staff particularly for being so wonderful all these years that I've been on the commission. And I'd like to thank the chairman for being such a good guide to us all, and my fellow commission members that I've had the pleasure of serving with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, and I'd like to thank you for being available and when I first got here and helping me out and showing me the ropes. I really appreciate it. And
Likewise, I'd like to thank Frank for his wonderful insights to all the cases we've had to discuss. Thank you, Frank.
I don't know what I'm going to do without my attorney on my side.
I have a communication from the commission or commissioners. Yes, I was just wondering, now that it's December, is Doña Andre wedding site no longer in operation?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Krentz, I believe the last wedding was around the Thanksgiving holiday, so they are no longer having wedding events at that venue.
Thank you. And have they applied for any kind of permitting at this point that you know of?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Krentz, they have not.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next, item 7, communications from the attorney.
I would simply like to reiterate the thanks, gratefulness to Commissioner Katz for his service, and I would also like to bring to the Commissioner's attention the fact that this is Vicky's last Planning Commission hearing with all of you.
Wow.
Oh, my.
Certainly thank her for her service.
Yes.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I don't know, Vicky, I only wanted to stay around while you and Paul were still here. Good luck. Thank you for all your help. I'm sure
Nothing
I'll talk
else.
to you more. Okay, matters from land use staff?
Mr. Chair, I also want to thank Commission Member Katz for his service on the Planning Commission and the County Development Review Committee. I think Mr. Katz is probably our longest tenured member of the committee, and it's, yeah, definitely been a pleasure, and just thank you for your service. Also, I wanted to recognize Commission Member Lopez. This would have actually been his last meeting as well. His term has expired, and he is no longer eligible to serve another term, so you will
You
be
won't see
getting.
him again.
So you will have 2 new Planning Commission members at the January meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our next meeting is January 19th, 2023, except for Frank. And I'm sure he's happy. And can I get an emotion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
We are adjourned. Thank you all.